Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we are taking a look at a very nice queenless middle game between Dawid Janowski and Frank Marshall, played in the Havana Masters in 1913. Now, this game actually has a little bit of history behind it, so it's well worth recounting. Going into the last round, and this was the last round, this game, so Marshall was leading, a point ahead of Capablanca, and Janowski was back in third. And yeah, I mean, Capablanca really wanted Janowski to beat Marshall. He had to beat Kupchik rather, and yeah, and then he would be able to share first if Janowski beat Marshall. So apparently the hall was packed there. Havana, this was Capablanca's home territory. 1,200 people in there, and the if I'm translating right, it says most of them women. So there we are, and there was a lot of needle between Janowski and Frank Marshall. And in the first game, Janowski had lost to Marshall, but he hadn't resigned. He'd conveyed his resignation through an intermediary. Shades of Korchnoi-Karpov there somehow. And so actually what happened was that in this game, Marshall didn't resign. He just went away from the board and let his clock tick down. But in the end, Capablanca drew with Kupchik, which only gave him 10 points. Marshall, even though he lost, still had 10.5. And then Marshall resigned in the end, and won the tournament all the same. And apparently, just if my translation is accurate, I don't know how accurate the source is. Translation will not be that great from me either. But Janowski got up onto a chair and proclaimed to the world that he'd done his best for Capablanca to win the tournament. And there was masses of sound and excited people running through the tournament hall and everything like that. It sounds like an unbelievable event. So there we are. Well, let's have a look at the game. That started d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6, bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, bishop e7, and well, again, you know, Janowski's always playing this move order and never taking the chance to play knight bd2. But played bishop d3. We've noted on this. We've noted this a number of times. Both Janowski and Marshall as well, quite big d4 experts for the time. They never bothered about trying to save a tempo. You know, keeping the bishop on f1 until black plays d takes c4 to be able to recapture on c4 in one go. They just played bishop d3 and went for it. So d takes c4 and knight d5, takes, castles, knight c3. Takes and b6, and well, I mean, these positions are quite common, often from the Lasker system of the Queen's Gambit declined. You know, black has less space. He's on his back third ranks, but having exchanged two minor pieces, you know, there's not really very many pieces that have to fit into that confined space. And well, black's got a lot of ways of freeing himself. You know, c5 takes d4. Opening up the c file as well is one key way. You know, the knight on d7 can go to f6 and then to d5 or into e4. So yeah, I mean, in general, you know, the engines consider these types of positions to be pretty equal, and I mean, you get them from the semi-Tarrasch as well, which is you know, thought to be the big equalizer in elite chess at the moment. You know, black's basically fine here. But that doesn't mean that there's no play at all. And Janowski played rook e1, bishop b7, e4, setting up the double pawn centre, rook f d8, and now played the move queen d2. Now, the engines aren't at all keen on this, but this has become quite a common manoeuvre for white in human games in this sort of structure. The queen's coming round to f4, and you know, maybe even round to g3, and just sort of you know, supporting some sort of you know, kingside attacks here. The engine's not really that impressed. They want to play bishop f1, and for example, after something like queen d6, then they want to play c4 just to be able to meet c5 with d5. But I mean, any of those positions are not that amazing for white, it has to be said. You know, well, the engines are giving it 0.1, 0.2, but if they don't like queen d2, but I have to say that even as a modern player looking at this position, this would probably be one of my first thoughts. So yeah, and you know, Janowski making this up as he went along, but apparently this had also been played Marshall had this as white against Capablanca earlier. So yeah, these positions were kind of quite well known already at that time. So queen f4, c takes d4, rook c8. The beauty of black's play is that it's very, very simple, really. Now the engines again prefer the bishop coming back to f1, but Janowski played the bishop to b3, and to be honest, this looks yeah, I would really say this is obviously the best move for white, because the bishop anchors the pawn on a2 and supports d4 to d5, and also puts some pressure along this diagonal. It just feels like a great move. It also covers the c2 square as well. So yeah, quite surprising that the engines don't really like it that much. And here Marshall played queen f6, and Capablanca in the tournament book considered this to be a mistake, but the engines are not too worried about it at all. Actually, they consider that white should bring the queen back to d2 and in a way reconnect the queen with the queen side and the center. But Janowski played queen g3, keeping the queens on. And this is now quite an interesting moment. Marshall played queen g6, but I think you can imagine, Marshall normally quite an aggressive player, but I can imagine that really only needing a draw to guarantee, absolute tournament victory. He was kind of looking to exchange stuff. And of course, against Janowski, well-known attacking player, somebody who was reputed to have exclaimed, "I hate endgames." Exchanging off queens might well have seemed like the right idea. What is interesting is that the engines again, I've talked about this in a number of videos already, that you really notice this with classic games, that often the classic players were kind of in a way sometimes accepting a passive role. They sort of said, okay, yeah, white's got a double pawn center, more space, I should just be passive and and not ruin anything. But the engines are, they're really looking for counterplay. So b5, h3, a5 is what the engines start doing, just desperately trying to get that queenside majority going, and really going for an advantage as well. So that's quite interesting. But queen g6 was played by Marshall, and well, the engines think queen f4 is best, but queen takes g6 was played by Janowski, followed by knight g5. And to be honest, this is a pretty decent idea. Yeah, this is quite an aggressive move, but so white's connecting up with this bishop on b3, attacking these two. And actually, Janowski's got two ideas. F4 to f5 is one idea, just trying to break open this pawn chain and get at the black king. The other idea is to play d5. Well, again, you're going to be clearing away the e6 pawn, and once that one's gone, you can move the d pawn onto d6 and attack f7. To be honest, if I face this in a game, after having thought, oh, okay, I'm exchanging off queens, nice and safe, then yeah, I would probably be, sort of worrying a little bit and trying to work out, exactly how to do this. The key point about having exchanged on g6 is that, of course, black no longer has to move h6 to chase away the knight. Even though the engines aren't too impressed by it, I like this idea a lot from Janowski. So what can black do? Well, the engines, of course, are looking to move their queenside pawns forward. So h4, b5 was the idea, and just try and play a4 and get your pieces as active as possible. And this is a pretty decent idea. Marshall played a sort of a nothing move, really, rook c3. I mean, it's not bad. You're maybe looking to get control of the c file, but the c file isn't really where stuff is happening. I mean, this bishop on b3, as we said, is doing a great job of covering c2 and anchoring the queen side. And what's really going to happen is there's going to be breaks in the center. So yeah, it would have been better to get the pawns rolling on the queen side rather than just playing around with pieces. Well, Janowski could have done a number of things, but he played f4. And yeah, even if the engines don't think this is the best move, this is actually, I think, a very dangerous move for human players to deal with. So the engines like knight f6 here, and their idea is that after f5, gf5, ef5, they've got this move knight h7. And the idea is, okay, we're going to get rid of this knight, you're going to get my e6 pawn, but this d pawn is hanging. Now the engines point out this idea, very powerful, e7, rook takes b3, and then the move a6, rook e5, which is quite a sharp position. White's got 2 pawns for the and a rook for the 2 minor pieces. Obviously e7 can be attacked, but yeah, still quite a sharp position. I wouldn't actually know, I would imagine that, intuitively I'd imagine that this is about equal, but yeah, plenty can go wrong in such positions as well. So yeah, what Janowski's doing, it's maybe not the best, but it's definitely challenging, and that's the most important thing. So Marshall went knight f8, and then we got rook d1. And here the engine suggests something interesting, and actually it's a move that Frank Marshall played later, but probably just a little bit too late. They suggest the move bishop a6. I'm sort of thinking bishop a6, what's that? Why don't we just go something like d5 then? But then the idea is to go bishop c4, and you're just going to get rid of that bishop, and then the pressure here basically just disappears. If you go something like ef, I go knight e6, and after knight e6 I throw in rook takes d1 and then take back on e6, and we've just got an equal rook ending there. And if you go rook c1, then I go rook c8, and once with a pair of rooks off, it's all going to be less dangerous for black there. But Marshall went knight h7, which is not a bad move, not a bad move at all. But black is definitely going to have still some challenges to overcome. Capablanca made the comment that it was a strange game because every exchange that black made seemed to make his position worse. And I can sort of imagine why you say that, but it's probably not objectively true. Probably black is absolutely fine in this position. But knight takes h7 was played, king h7, and again, it's not the engine's main move, but I understand it completely because, you're going to play this move d5, that's what Janowski did, and so having the king far away from that passed d-pawn, also not protecting the pawn on f7 is, a very nice idea. And you've got to say, Janowski's playing this position with lots of energy. Really finding interesting ideas, challenging ideas. Maybe completely manageable for an engine, but for a human player, I can imagine that Marshall, was feeling the pressure here. And maybe slightly unexpected, really, because Janowski, you're expecting him to be only good with the queens on, really. But he was actually, quite a decent endgame player. Just he played some bad endgames in his time, but I think even modern players are quite guilty of that as well. I mean, everyone plays bad endgames because they're very, very difficult. But he had a lot of endgame skill as well, and he's won some very good endgames in his time. So e takes d5, e takes d5, and this pawn is a runner. And now, well, the best line that white had here was to play the move. The black had rather was to play rook c7 and rook cd7, and this was recommended at the time, I think, by Capablanca. And it's fair enough. I mean, white's got this move rook e3, which is quite nice because if you go rook d6, I take, and I go bishop f7, which is rather irritating with the threat of rook h3 checkmate. The weakness of the king on the h file is going to be a major thing. But well, as long as you don't do that, the engines were saying, well, let's just go a5, b5, a4, just distract this bishop away from there, and then I'll be able to take the pawn on d6. It's about even, it's. For some reason, Marshall didn't do that, and he played the move bishop a6, this idea, just looking to play bishop c4. Not a bad idea at all, but just a slightly less convincing drawing than rook c7. So rook e7 was played, and now Marshall played bishop c4. Important that after rook c7 you've got the discovered attack bishop b3. Bishop c4 from Janowski, rook c4. And now, rook f7 was recommended by Capablanca, but rook d6 basically was what the engines thought, and rook a7, rook f4. White is a pawn up, but it's going to be kind of difficult really to make the most of it. Although black has to be a little bit careful. This was the engine game: king h7, rook g7, now king h6. The king escapes there. We're going to pick up this pawn, and we're going to go back to being one pawn down. Black's rooks are active. It's not going to be enough. So in a way, I think Janowski's idea d6 was definitely worth it. And Marshall actually played a good move, and then just in a way display that he'd rather missed the point of it. Rook c6 was his move, and now again the engines want rook f7, but yeah, this is not going to be a win for white here. Black is just going to be able to get himself free. His rook's very, very active. The most you'll get is rook and 3 against rook and 2. So Janowski played d7. And now this is an absolutely crucial moment. Black has one move to save the draw, and no other move will do. And, well, if you want to give yourself a little exercise here, then you can pause the video. Because it's quite nice. I did spot it just whilst reading through the game, actually, so I was quite pleased about that. Good to feel like a grandmaster from time to time. But the key move here is rook e6, with the clever idea that rook f7 allows king g8. Very, very key. And if you go rook e6, well, I just take, and then I just bring my king round here. And, well, you're just basically going to wait. I mean, basically you're going to use these queenside pawns to distract the rook, and then you'll win the pawn on d7. It's just going to end up a draw, basically. So rook e6 key, and pointed out, I think it was by Capablanca in the tournament book. Yeah, Marshall here played the terrible move rook c7, and I think, yeah, I mean, I think that what he was thinking was, okay, I'll actually the white rooks are tied down, so I'm just going to play rook b7 and then just move my pawns down, and we'll distract this rook from the protection of the d7 pawn. I mean, I think that was probably what he was thinking of, but I think he'd totally reckoned without the weakness of the black king, because the black king can't go back to g8 because of rook e8 check, and well, the king doesn't have a whole lot of room on the h file. So Janowski played g4, just with the idea of playing g5 and then rook d3 to h3 check, and after king g8 we'll go rook e8 and checkmate. I mean, that's the simple idea, and you know, it's +5 +6 simply. It's just completely winning for white here. In a number of different ways. Yeah, I mean, if g5, then you know, Janowski's idea obviously was to go f5. So what are you going to do? b5 was played, g5, b4, king f2 from Janowski. It doesn't really matter what you do anymore. King e1. a5, and now actually, yeah, simply rook e8 would have been just completely winning. I'm not quite sure why Janowski didn't do that. He played rook d3. Maybe he was enjoying torturing Marshall, who was letting his time run out. Rook c3, takes, king d1. I mean, you know, obviously black's completely paralysed here. King a3, king c3. Yeah, Marshall really should have resigned, but Janowski had the reputation of carrying on forever in his games and never resigning. So I think that that players against him tended to do the same. f5 played, g takes f6. Yeah, I mean, there would be a chance here that you might get some sort of stalemate somehow, with the king not having any moves and all the pawns unable to move, but g takes f6 kind of ruins all that. King g6, f7, and well, rook e8 came in, and the game did not last long. So there we are, quite a funny story behind the game, and actually a very nice game from Janowski. Yeah, I mean, if you just look at what the engines are saying, then you might not be that impressed, but bearing in mind that the way that Janowski handled it would be, frankly, as a, well, I'm not a modern player, I suppose, but as a reasonably recent player, that would be my first intuitive idea of, yes, this is good play in these positions. Then I think we can excuse Janowski in 1913 for playing in this way. And certainly I like the way that he handled this queenless middle game. You know, great aggression, and you know, even if the moves aren't the top engine ones, they're certainly setting black a big challenge. And well, actually Marshall didn't do too badly, but just this crucial moment. Just in this position, you know, this move rook e6, lovely resource, that would have held the draw for Marshall and guaranteed him clear first, as it was, because he lost, but Capablanca only drew against Kupchik. Then yeah, Marshall still ended up as clear winner of the tournament. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed the video, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, Reengineering the Chess Classics. That's the recent one. well, take a look at the Silicon Road as well. But Reengineering the Chess Classics, it's full of classic games like this, analysed with the engines, discovering all sorts of amazing things, and not just tactics, as what you might think, but just massive strategical things, lots of things in the end games as well. Just really incredible what we found. So do take a look at that. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and really hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.